We are watching the end of Skip Bayless. This is a controversial yet brave title from the LeBatard Show. So Skip Bayless has been in hot water recently because his ratings for Undisputed have been awful. They've been tanking since Shannon Sharpe left. The show has not been the same. Apparently, I don't watch the show, but apparently fans are not happy with it. Fans are checking out. They're tuning in somewhere else. So we're going to hear what Dan, LeBatard, and the gang think about this, react as only we can do.
I want to know, though, from you guys, because I feel like, I don't know who the audience is for argument television, okay? But I think one of the reasons our audience rejects this talk is because they don't want, if they wanted First Take or...
Here's the deal. So back in the day, talking 10, 15 years ago, embrace debate, this like hot take, like argumentative style television and sports media was the thing to do. It was in vogue. We saw it on, and it blew up because of Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith, no doubt about it. First Take and the iterations of their show became the style for sports television. That's not the case anymore. If you want to hear people arguing, if you want to see argumentative television, go on Twitter, go on Reddit. Now people, they either want two different forms of sports media. They want highly informative because of fantasy football, because of sports betting. They don't care about hot takes. They don't care about some insane opinion because they're trying to figure out, okay, the Celtics play the Nuggets tonight. The Celtics are -2. Who am I going to bet on? It's asking, having the argument for the 100th time of, is LeBron James better than Michael Jordan? That's not helping me bet the Pistons and the Pacers. That's not helping me manage my fantasy team. So now people are drifting more towards the super informative, super analytical, super data-based sports research or sports media. When they're doing that and you go from that to nothing but hot takes, it sounds kind of weird because you have the data. You have the information. And then you go listen to this and it's like, well, I know this is wrong. I know this is just two old guys screaming at each other. It's not fun. The other form of content that people are ingesting is this kind of like background discussion, long form, kind of relaxing content. We see that across all content. YouTube used to be full of 2-minute, 3-minute videos, right? So tons of graphics, tons of edits, tons of sound effects, all that stuff. People don't want that anymore. People want, I call it background. It's like a background television where they're doing chores or they're eating dinner and they can put on a 45-minute discussion about a topic they find interesting and they want to watch that or listen to that or however they want to do it. They want to listen/watch in the car, turn on a video, put it in the cup holder, let the audio play and drive 30 minutes home on their commute. That's what they want. Those ways of ingesting media do not work for this like loud, screaming, argumentative style. People don't want to hear that while they're eating dinner or while they're doing chores or while they're driving home. That's not how people ingest media anymore. So I think a lot of the embrace debate, if you will, those styles, it's just kind of fallen out of favor.
Or it's permutations. That's where they would be in the middle of the day instead of consuming what we're doing here. But I have found fascinating, Stugotz, over the last 15 years of what Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless built, right? Because a decade as the #1 show on television, that's like unheard of. What Stephen A. Smith is worth right now, after very quietly, Stugotz, saying a couple times, I'm underpaid on television. He welcomes in McAfee and all these $17 million contracts, Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, when he's the voice and face of ESPN, and he's now underpaid as soon as they all arrive. He welcomes them all in, and now his ratings are giant. And the greatest, I don't know if it's the greatest ego mistake I've seen in sports media, but Skip Bayless underestimating that he needed Shannon Sharpe.
Yeah, I mean, this happens all the time. This happens in every walk of life where someone thinks they're the star when they ain't the star. Skip Bayless absolutely thought Skip Bayless was the star. He absolutely thought he was the draw. He absolutely thought everyone else is his sidekick. He is the reason people are tuning in. That's just not the case. Stephen A. Smith seemingly understands that. Stephen A. Smith seemingly understands he can, if eyeballs are on him, he can be entertaining. But people who bring eyeballs in, like Pat McAfee or whoever, that's good for business. That's good for him because it means more eyeballs are coming to him. Skip Bayless might think, well, wait a minute, why is Pat McAfee getting paid more than me? I'm Skip Bayless. So his ego, especially with Shannon Sharpe, where I think it sounds like he kind of had the pivot moment where he had the fork in the road and said, it's me or Shannon. And you're going to stick with me because I'm Skip Bayless and I don't need Shannon Sharpe. I can plug anyone in and I can make them work, whether it's Lil Wayne or whoever else, Richard Sherman or whoever else Skip Bayless puts on the show. And at this point, it's just not the case. I think Skip Bayless he hasn't evolved, or he might not care to evolve, or he might not understand the landscape. And he believes that it's still 2008 and people are tuning in just to hear what he has to say.
Yes.
For that show to be successful.
Colossal mistake.
But the numbers, Stugatz, so they make the same amount of money, okay? And Skip Bayless, but Stephen A. Smith also has a production company as part of what he's trying to build, which is going to be giant, I am sure. It's going to be powerful and impressive, whether he does it with ESPN or outside of ESPN, because Stephen A. Smith wants to play with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in the sphere of, I'm as big a star in sports right now as there is. I'm a media star, and I'm at my company, and I'm underpaid. And he's going to have power. He's going to have an ability to get power here, Stugatz, because he brought in Shannon Sharpe too. He carried him over. Yeah. Shannon Sharpe was done, Stugatz. Like he wasn't going to get back in the game, and now he's a giant on impact. And man,
the same thing. And this goes again. This isn't just sports media, but Skip Bayless 15 years ago, he was, and we see this across. We see this with people who at one point were at the top of the industry. People like Howard Stern or Skip Bayless in this case. Whenever you're being funneled an enormous audience, because the enormous audience is all going to the same place, in this case, ESPN with Skip Bayless back on First Take, or Fox Sports or whatever, Howard Stern, Sirius XM, basically him coming pre-downloaded into tons of cars. Now that there's so many different options, Skip Bayless is competing with so many people, so many individual creators. We're seeing that across the board where, before, like I said, if you're in a car and you want to listen to some talk radio, you got like 6 different options. Then podcasts come along. You've got infinite options. Then YouTube comes along. You got infinite options. So Skip Bayless being Skip Bayless or Skip Bayless being on Fox Sports, those aren't the draws that they once were.
And as soon as he arrives, and this has been brutal to watch, I've hated this for him. The piranhas arrive and devour him and mock him and try to eat him up. And this man is so strong. Like, his story is so strong, to come from the poverty he came from, a problem with a lisp, to being like a Hall of Fame loudmouth who now, has 2 artificial hips, but still wants to compete with everybody. And now can, because he's got a giant, valuable platform, and he works so hard, Stugatz. And I can't help but be impressed that at the top of our game, what the people are consuming, the candy of what it is that we do, we're watching the end of Skip Bayless, because those numbers are so bad, Stugatz. We were doing twice those numbers on ESPN News. Like, he's coming to the end of his contract, and Nick Wright.
Well, that's the crazy thing. I mean, that's the crazy thing too, is that you can look at some people. You can look at some big celebrities, people who are on huge contracts with ESPN or Fox Sports or whatever. You can look at them, and you can look at their YouTube, or you can look at their individual platforms, and you can look at the numbers. It's very transparent. And I mean, even like major news networks, like my show, the studio, everything we're doing here, the content mecca, we're based in New Orleans all the time. I check to see what news stations and content aggregators in New Orleans are doing. I check the numbers. We're sitting there, 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there. We're right behind some of the biggest players, but we are well ahead of the big news stations in New Orleans. And that just goes to show right there the difference in how people are consuming media. 20 years ago, whenever those news stations were just being funneled viewers because they were on every TV, that's where people got their news. They had no other option. Now, you don't get by just by being a news station, or just by having some crazy acronym in front of your television station, or you don't get by just by being Skip Bayless. There's too much competition out there. If Shannon Sharpe would have not went on Stephen A. Smith's, if he wouldn't have went to ESPN, if he would have just done Club Shay Shay. What did his Cat Williams interview do? Like 60 million viewers? That video alone is so much bigger and so much more impressive than a whole month of ratings of what Undisputed is doing. That's the changing landscape. Is you don't need the show anymore. You don't need the network anymore. You don't need the name anymore, the Skip Bayless name. You can do it on your own as long as you're entertaining enough and as long as people watch. That is the great equalizer right now. These big networks and these big former stars are running into individual content creators or even just power, even just the power of the individual content creator. You can't call Shannon Sharpe an individual content creator, but he kind of is. I mean, he is. Like Club Shay Shay is an individual content creator type production. It's very, I'm sure, with the money he has and all of that, I'm sure he's got a serious crew behind him, but you could do Club Shay Shay if you wanted to with a 1-2 man crew. You really could. I mean, you set everything up and you get the studio and you get all that. You can do the rest. Compare that with what it takes to produce Undisputed. And these big networks are going to start cutting the Skip Baylesses who aren't meeting the rating criteria.
Is here to have the money that Fox has to offer, and Colin Cowherd's going to be able to do whatever he wants with him and his company and Shannon Sharpe, and they're going to compete at the top of the game, the sports media games, and the.
Colin evolved. Perfect example. Colin evolved. Colin is so smart when it comes to media. Colin understood the power of the creator. So what did he do? Did he rely on the herd? Did he rely on his show, The Blazing Five? No, he didn't rely on that. He went and got this podcast network, and he has a very strong podcast network. A lot of those shows are individual content creators. The Colin Cowherd podcast is shot exactly like basically my show, just without the green screen. He's in front of a wall. There's no edits. There's no fancy graphics. It's very simple, and that's it. So he's got this huge podcast network that's evolving and moving forward with sports media. Very smart. Skip Bayless isn't doing it.
Athlete games at the top of the business. I find that stuff fascinating. Am I the only one?
No, I do too.
Yeah. That's not interesting to you guys.
I think the evolution of media, content creation, whatever industry it is, sports media we're talking about here, I think it's so interesting. And maybe it's because I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen every iteration of content creation, whether it was YouTube or streaming or Twitch or social media or blogs. I mean, we're seeing such a shift, and I don't think people even realize it. We're seeing such a shift, and we have seen such a shift in the last 12 years. I mean, we went from terrestrial radio and TV stations to the blog universe where all these websites like the Chive and Bro Bible and Barstool popped up. Then you started seeing individual content creators create their own, like what Bill Simmons was doing, and even Glenn Beck when he left Fox News, and Colin Cowherd, and just how they start to kind of push their own brand. And now we're seeing a pushback against those same blogs. Like, you're seeing the Chive and Bro Bible and Barstool not have the power they once did because it's swinging to the individual. Like Barstool Sports, this is going to sound weird. Barstool Sports is not as big as Dave Portnoy. Dave Portnoy as the individual is the content. Big Cat with Barstool is bigger than Barstool. It's no longer the company. It's no longer the blog. It's no longer the conglomerate. We just saw it with Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth just closed down or shut down their video content kind of thing. Rooster Teeth was an old school like content factory for mostly like video games, TV, movies, that kind of content. They just shut their doors because that like structure of a big group, a huge production to create content like that, it doesn't work anymore because the individual can do the exact same thing at such a lesser price, at such a lesser cost, more frequently. So we're swinging now another way. You know, it's just amazing how this landscape keeps changing.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting, big
How
brother.
can that not be interesting to
They're
you guys?
uncultured. That's what they are, uncultured. I'm with you, big brother. This is very, especially as a black man, you know what I mean, going through all of those things.
Juju, Stephen A. Smith was fired and came back from the dead.
Right.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it.
But
it doesn't get talked about enough, man.
But he's
quite frankly, it's impressive what he's done.
Right.
Of course it is.
That show. How can you guys disrespect what that man has done? You disrespect what he has done to get back to the top of the game through the labyrinth.
Fine, but what are we going to talk about his funeral if we keep talking about it?
Like Pat McAfee is a good example too. Or Pat McAfee, it's like who has more value? You know, someone like Max Kellerman, who, you know, no hate to Max Kellerman, but he's been through the ESPN ringer, he's been through the ESPN, you know, the whole cycle or whatever. But as an individual, he doesn't offer much. He's just like a plug-and-play kind of guy. Like, put him on a show, he can host it, he can do whatever. Or you get someone like Pat McAfee, who's a content machine, who as an individual, he doesn't need the network. He doesn't need ESPN. He doesn't need the producer meetings. He doesn't need all of that. He can efficiently run his content factory better, pretty much, than ESPN can run their network. That's really the crux of it. You know, it's like we're now seeing where it's so accessible, the individual can run a show or a channel or a content factory or whatever equally or better than these huge major networks. It's exactly the same thing I'm talking about with the news. An individual content creator can run their show, their channel, all their stuff better, more efficiently, at a level similar or better than huge like local news stations. Huge local news stations with hundreds of employees, sometimes thousands of employees. Their quality of content is not as good as some content creators working out of a one-bedroom studio. It's just a completely different landscape.
Now.
Exactly.
He did what Shane Gillis did times 100. He got them folks to invest in him, and now he's still at the top of that.
Shane Gillis, great example. Shane Gillis gets fired from SNL. He's way bigger now than he would have been if he would have done SNL to start with. Why? Because of his podcast. And what did it take to get his podcast going? A laptop, a couple microphones, and a webcam. That's it. That's the whole thing. Then you clip it, you throw it on YouTube, let people watch it. A lot of his video, such a good example. A lot of his videos on YouTube, a lot of their clips, it doesn't even have video. It'll be like a weird graphic or a weird like stock footage and then the audio playing, but people aren't watching. People are playing that in their car. People are playing a video game, and they have the Shane Gillis clip that they pulled up, the 20-minute clip. They have that on in the background. And Shane, for like, I don't know, $500 a month, like as far as just the cost of what it takes to do his podcast, that his individual content factory, if he wanted to, he really went after it, is bigger and better than this enormous entity that is Saturday Night Live. And the amount of money it takes to produce the show and the amount of writers and the amount of all this, it's everything is shifting. Everything is changing. And I mean, the TV is up against this now because people have a choice. People have a choice of how am I going to spend a couple of hours outside of work? Am I going to watch this 30-minute episode of whatever TV show it is? Or am I going to watch this 30-minute YouTube video from my favorite content creator? 30 years ago, wasn't even a question. Now, it's swinging to where people are watching the content creators more than the TV show. You know, back then it was like how you get home. I remember when I was in high school and I did homework. I would come home, I'd put it on ABC Family. I'd watch a couple episodes of whatever it is, Gilmore Girls or Friends or whatever's playing. I'd watch that just because it was on. I didn't have a choice. I did my homework. Now, what are kids doing their homework to? They're getting home, put on their favorite streamer, put on their favorite YouTube channel. That's the background. They're not going to TNT. They're not going to TBS. They're not going to ABC Family. They're going to YouTube. They're going to Twitch. They're going to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. It's just shifting. You can see it. So why wouldn't it shift with sports media? The same as radio. Back then, it was like you wanted a syndicated radio show. When I got out of college in 2012 or 2012. In 2012, the only way to get your opinions heard was terrestrial radio. You had to start at 99.7 The Bear or whatever in some horrible city, hopefully boost their ratings to where you go to the next city and then you go to the next city. And that was it. Now, who listens to terrestrial radio? Who listens to 97.9 The Groove? Like, does anybody listen to 101.4 Sports Talk? No one listens. I guess the older generation. But now it's like I'm listening to whatever podcast or I'm listening to whatever live stream or whatever YouTube channel. I get commenters all the time. All the time. Let's say, James, I'm a truck driver. I work in Lafayette, Louisiana. I drive 2 hours a day, every day. I listen to your videos while I'm in the truck. And a tip of the cap, kudos. It makes me smile. It's the greatest compliment I can get. The greatest comment I can get is I listen to your stuff when I'm eating dinner or when I'm doing laundry or when I'm doing a chore or going on a walk or working out or driving in my car, whatever it is, because that means you had infinite choices to listen to, talk about whatever topic, and to choose this channel or to choose whoever it is. I'm just talking for my case. That is the ultimate compliment.
Stephen A. Smith is about to change the game again, and now he rides with Shannon Sharpe, and they can build whatever the hell they want.
Right.
With or without ESPN. That's the interesting part. With or without.
Of course. With or without Disney, or sell it back to Disney. This is now not just the money game. It's the power game. It's the influence game. It's the legacy game. Yep. It's not just Stephen A. who's going to get fat on fame. He's trying to build something that is a giant platform. First Take has been #1 for more than 10 years. Skip Bayless created an economy. Stephen A. Smith buried it. He's super competitive. He's a conqueror. And he's getting bigger than he's ever been. And he comes from McDonald's commercials. Like, what is about to happen is he is about to, I think, shake the industry with his next contract, and should, because he's a ratings monster. And I can't believe you guys don't, you guys don't find that interesting.
It's also like Pat McAfee. Like if Pat McAfee was fired from ESPN, let's just say he was fired, he could produce his entire show, not miss an episode. He could not even blink, and he'd produce his entire show, and it probably would be better because he wouldn't have the restraints of ESPN. That is Pat McAfee versus Disney, like versus one of the biggest companies in the world. And as an individual, because of his leverage, because of his reach, because of his show, because of how entertaining he is, his fans, all that stuff, he can compete with Disney, with ESPN. If you told me I could take Pat McAfee or I could take all of ESPN, like all the SportsCenter hosts, all the analysts, all the reporters, all that stuff, I'm taking Pat McAfee because I know I can get the same amount of content, probably better content for so much cheaper, way more efficiently. And that's how people are doing it. Let me know in the conversation, or let me know in the comments below. What do you think about this conversation? Very interesting. Love the deep media talk. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.